There is something about Keanu Reeves that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. It is not just his talent or his fame. It is the quiet way he carries himself through a world that often rewards arrogance and noise. He lost his best friend to an overdose. He lost his daughter and the love of his life in ways that would break most people, yet he never let bitterness take root in his heart. He gives away millions without seeking attention. He takes pay cuts so film crews can keep their jobs. He sits on public benches and talks to strangers as if they matter, because to him, they do. Keanu once said that grief changes shape, but it never ends. He said he carries his losses with him every single day. But instead of letting that weight crush him, he uses it to stay humble, to stay kind, to stay human. That is why his story inspires me. Not because he is perfect, but because he chooses goodness even when life gives him every reason not to. The story I am about to tell you is inspired by that spirit. It is a tale of impossible choices, of love buried under years of silence, and of a man who was offered the entire world but chose something far more precious instead. This is a fictional story, but the lessons within it are as real as the heart beating in your chest right now. So settle in, take a breath, and let me take you to the rain-soaked streets of Seoul, where everything is about to change. The rain had stopped, but the air still held its memory. There was a heaviness in the atmosphere that night, the kind that presses against your chest without reason. Somewhere in the narrow streets of Itaewon, a man stood motionless in the doorway of a small motorcycle repair shop. His name was Keanu, and he was staring at nothing in particular, just the wet pavement reflecting the neon glow of distant signs. Something felt different. He could not name it, could not point to any single thing that had changed. But his breath came slower than usual, and his hands, still stained with engine grease, hung at his sides as if waiting for a signal only his body understood. The shop behind him was modest. Old tools lined the walls like relics from another life. A single lamp flickered above a workbench covered in parts and memories. This was his world now, quiet, anonymous, safe. He had built it carefully over 15 years, brick by brick, silence by silence. He had come to Seoul to disappear, and he had succeeded. The man he used to be, the Hollywood stuntman who once flew through explosions and danced with death for cameras, that man was gone. Buried beneath guilt and grief, and the kind of sorrow that never fully heals. 15 years ago, his best friend Marcus had died during a stunt that Keanu had designed. The harness failed. The fall was instant. Keanu had watched from 20 feet away, helpless, frozen, his voice trapped in his throat. He had replayed that moment 10,000 times since then. The way Marcus looked at him in that final second, not with fear, with trust, that was the part that destroyed him. After the funeral, Keanu walked away from everything. His career, his friends, and the woman he loved more than anything in the world, a woman named Sandra who had begged him to stay. He left without explanation because he believed he did not deserve her. He believed he did not deserve anyone. Now he fixed motorcycles and helped people in his own quiet way. There was an underground network in Seoul that helped exploited foreign workers escape dangerous situations. Keanu was part of it. He never spoke about it. He simply showed up when needed, used his skills to protect the vulnerable, and vanished before anyone could thank him. That night, however, fate had other plans. She appeared from the darkness like a ghost, a young woman barely 25 running in heels that clicked against the wet stone. Behind her, 3 men moved with predatory precision. Keanu did not think. He stepped into the alley, placed himself between the girl and her pursuers, and for the first time in years, he let the old training take over. The fight was brief and brutal. Within 90 seconds, all 3 men were on the ground, groaning. The girl stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Her name was Jae-yeon. She did not tell him that night. She simply whispered thank you and disappeared into the rain. Keanu returned to his shop, washed the blood from his knuckles, and tried to forget. But some moments refused to be forgotten. 3 days later, black subs surrounded his shop. Men in expensive suits stepped out, their faces emotionless. Keanu was taken, not violently but firmly, to an estate outside the city. There, in a room filled with silk and shadow, he met the man who would change everything. Chairman Baek Sung-ho, the Shadow King, the most powerful crime lord in South Korea. The old man sat in a wheelchair, his body frail but his eyes burning with intelligence. He studied Keanu for a long moment before speaking. You saved my daughter when my own men failed. I know who you were, Mr. Reeves. I know what you are capable of, and I am prepared to offer you $10 million to become my personal security chief." Keanu looked at the dying man, then at the luxury surrounding him, then at his own calloused hands. "I appreciate the offer, but I am not interested." Chairman Beek smiled, as if he had expected this answer. "Before you leave, there is something you should know. There is a woman, American. Her name is Sandra Bullock. She arrived in Seoul 3 weeks ago. She is searching for something dangerous, and very soon, unless someone protects her, she will die." Keanu felt his heart stop. He had not heard that name in 15 years, and now, in the most unlikely place on earth, it had found him again. The name echoed in his mind like a wound that had never truly closed. Sandra. For 15 years, he had trained himself not to think of her. He had buried every photograph, every memory, every whisper of what they once shared. But the heart does not forget the people it has loved. It simply learns to ache in silence. Keanu left the chairman's estate that night with his thoughts spinning in directions he could not control. Sandra was here, in Seoul, walking straight into a war she did not understand. The idea of her in danger made something deep inside him crack open. He had spent so long convincing himself that staying away was the kindest thing he could do for her. But kindness built on lies is just another form of cowardice. He knew that now. It took him 2 days to find her. She was staying in a small guest house in Hongdae, a neighborhood filled with artists and musicians and dreamers. He watched her from across the street for nearly an hour before he found the courage to approach. She looked different. Older, of course, but there was something else. A sharpness in her eyes that had not been there before. The softness he remembered had been replaced by steel. Life had changed her just as it had changed him. When he finally knocked on her door, she opened it without hesitation. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy with everything they had never said. 15 years, her voice was calm, but he could hear the tremor beneath it. Not a call, not a letter, not even a goodbye, and now you just appear. Keanu felt the weight of her words press against his chest. "I did not deserve to contact you, not after what happened. You do not get to decide that for both of us." She stepped back, allowing him inside but keeping her distance. "I waited for you, Keanu, for months. I thought you were grieving, I thought you needed time, but you were just gone, like I meant nothing. You meant everything, that is why I left." Sandra shook her head slowly, and he could see the old pain flickering behind her anger. "That does not make sense." "I know," he looked down at his hands, the same hands that had failed to save Marcus. "I blamed myself for what happened. I still do. And I thought if I stayed with you, my darkness would swallow you too, so I ran. I have been running ever since." The room fell silent again. Outside, the sounds of the city hummed softly, indifferent to the weight of their reunion. Sandra was in Seoul for a reason. She had become an investigative journalist, one of the most respected in the world. Her specialty was exposing human trafficking networks, shining light into the darkest corners where evil thrived. She was following a lead, a whistleblower named Park Min-soo who had evidence linking a massive trafficking operation to powerful figures in Korean society. What she did not know was that this operation was run by Chairman Beek's younger brother, a man named Beek Sung-jin. He was cruel, ambitious, and utterly without mercy. Keanu warned her. He told her about the chairman, about the underworld she was stepping into. But Sandra refused to back down. "People are suffering," she said firmly. "Children are being sold. Families are being destroyed. I cannot walk away just because it is dangerous." He looked at her then, and despite everything, he felt something like pride. She had always been brave, braver than him, braver than anyone he had ever known. The danger arrived faster than either of them expected. The next evening, Sung-jin's men came for her. Keanu was waiting. The chase that followed took them through subway tunnels, across rooftops, and down alleys that twisted like veins through the city's heart. Keanu fought with a ferocity he had forgotten he possessed. Not for glory, not for redemption, but for her, only for her. When it was over, when they finally found safety in a safe house run by Detective Kwon, an honest cop who had been tracking the trafficking ring for years, Sandra looked at Keanu with something new in her eyes. Not forgiveness. Not yet. but perhaps the beginning of understanding. 2 days later, Keanu was summoned to the chairman's estate once more. This time, the old man's offer was different. "I am dying," Chairman Beek said quietly. "My empire will crumble without a successor. My brother is a monster who will burn this city to the ground. But you, Mr. Reeves, you have a conscience. I am offering you everything. My businesses, my wealth, my daughter's hand in marriage, power beyond anything you have ever imagined. All I ask in return is one simple thing." Keanu waited. "Stop the journalist, make her walk away. If her story breaks, my brother will start a war. Thousands will die. I am not asking you to harm her. I am asking you to save this city by silencing her." The weight of the offer pressed down on Keanu like a mountain. He could have everything: wealth, power, a chance to destroy the trafficking ring from within, but the price was Sandra, her truth, her mission, her very soul. He left the estate without giving an answer, but he knew, deep in his bones, that he had already made his choice. The city held its breath that night. Somewhere between the neon lights and the silent stars, a man stood on a rooftop overlooking the Han River. The water below moved slowly, carrying reflections of a world that never stopped changing. Keanu had not slept in 2 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw two futures. In one, he was powerful beyond measure, seated at the head of an empire, respected and feared. In the other, he was hunted, broken, perhaps dead. But Sandra was beside him. And that made all the difference. She found him there just before dawn. Her footsteps were soft against the concrete, but he heard her anyway. He always knew when she was near. It was something his heart remembered even when his mind tried to forget. "You have been up here for hours," she said quietly. "I have been thinking." "About his offer?" Keanu nodded slowly. He turned to face her, and in the pale light of the coming sunrise, he saw the woman he had loved for half his life. The woman he had abandoned. The woman who had every right to hate him but was still standing here, waiting for his answer. "I was offered everything tonight," he said. "Power, money, a new life. All I had to do was stop you." Sandra's expression did not change, but he saw her shoulders tense. "And what did you decide?" Keanu took a step closer. 15 years ago, I left you because I thought I did not deserve to stand beside you. I was wrong. I should have let you choose, so I am letting you choose now. Whatever you decide, I am with you, even if it costs us everything." For a long moment, Sandra said nothing. The wind moved between them, carrying the scent of rain and something like hope. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Then let us finish this." The days that followed were the most dangerous of their lives. Together with Detective Kwon, they built a case against Sung Jin and his trafficking empire. Jae-yeon, the chairman's daughter, joined them in secret. She had grown up surrounded by darkness, but she had never accepted it. She provided access codes, safe house locations, and the names of corrupt officials who protected her uncle's operations. Park Min-soo, the whistleblower, delivered the final pieces: shipping manifests, bank records, video testimonies from survivors. The evidence was overwhelming. Sandra's story would expose not just Sung Jin, but an entire network of evil that stretched across borders and into the highest levels of power. But darkness does not surrender quietly. Sung Jin discovered Jae-yeon's betrayal on a Tuesday evening. His men took her from her apartment without a sound. By midnight, Keanu received a message that made his blood run cold. "Bring me Sandra Bullock and her evidence, or I will return my niece to you in pieces." Keanu showed the message to Chairman Beek. The old man sat in his wheelchair, his face gray with illness and grief. For the first time since they had met, Keanu saw him not as a crime lord, but as a dying father watching his world collapse. "Your brother has Jae-yeon," Keanu said. "You built this empire, now it is consuming your own family." Chairman Beek closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were tears on his cheeks. "I thought I could control the darkness. I was arrogant. My legacy is nothing but ash." "Then help us end it. Not for power, not for legacy, for Jae-yeon, for every person your brother has destroyed, for your own soul." The silence stretched between them. Then slowly, Chairman Beek nodded. He gave Keanu everything: access codes to Sung Jin's compound, security schedules, escape routes. and most importantly, a recorded confession of his own crimes to be released after his death. He wanted the truth to bury him. He wanted his final act to be something other than evil. The raid was planned for midnight. Detective Kwon assembled a team of officers he trusted, the few who had not been corrupted. Sandra prepared to broadcast her story live, ensuring it could never be suppressed. And Keanu, armed with nothing but his fists and his fury, went to save Jae-yeon. The compound was a fortress of concrete and steel. Keanu moved through it like a ghost, taking down guards one by one. Every blow he landed carried the weight of 15 years of guilt. Every step forward was a step toward redemption. He found Jae-yeon in a basement room, bound and bruised but alive. As he cut her restraints, the door behind them crashed open. Sung-jin stood in the doorway, a gun in his hand and madness in his eyes. His voice was calm, almost amused. "My brother chose a stranger over blood, and now you will watch his daughter die because you could not walk away." But Jae-yeon was not the frightened girl Keanu had saved in the alley weeks ago. She had found her courage. In one swift motion, she drove her elbow into Sung-jin's stomach, creating an opening. Keanu moved without hesitation, disarming the man in a single brutal strike. Sung-jin collapsed to his knees, hatred burning in his eyes. "Kill me," he spat. "That is what people like us do." Keanu looked down at the broken man before him. Somewhere above, he could hear sirens approaching. Sandra's story was broadcasting across the world. The empire was falling. "No," Keanu said quietly. "You will live. You will face trial. The world will see exactly what you are. And that is worse than death for a man like you." He turned away, took Jae-yeon's hand, and walked toward the light. The silence that followed the storm was unlike anything Keanu had ever known. It was not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. For the first time in 15 years, the weight on his chest had lifted. Not completely. Some burdens never fully disappear, but enough that he could breathe again, enough that he could look at the sky without feeling like he was drowning. The raid had succeeded. Sung-jin was in custody, his empire dismantled piece by piece. Sandra's story had broadcast across the world, reaching millions of viewers who watched in horror as the truth unfolded. Politicians were arrested. Businessmen were exposed. Corrupt officers were stripped of their badges and their dignity. The trafficking network that had destroyed countless lives was finally, irrevocably broken. But victory always comes with a price. Chairman Baek Sung-ho died 3 days after the raid. He passed quietly in his sleep, his daughter holding his hand. Keanu was there too, standing in the corner of the room, watching a man take his final breath. He had hated the chairman once. He had seen him as a monster, a symbol of everything wrong with the world. But in those last days, he had seen something else. A father desperate to protect his child. A man haunted by the choices he had made. A soul searching for redemption, even as the darkness closed in. The chairman's confession was released the following morning. The media painted him as a villain, and perhaps he was. But Keanu knew the truth was more complicated. People are not simply good or evil. They are a mixture of both, constantly fighting battles that no one else can see. The chairman had done terrible things, but in the end he had chosen to help. He had chosen to sacrifice his legacy so that others might live. And that choice, however late it came, mattered. Jae-yeon inherited what remained of her father's legitimate businesses. The shipping company, the real estate holdings, the investments that had been built on the backs of suffering. She could have sold everything and walked away. She could have taken the money and disappeared into a life of comfort and anonymity, but that was not who she was. 1 week after her father's death, Jae-yeon held a press conference. Cameras flashed as she stepped up to the microphone, her face pale but her voice steady. "My family's name has been synonymous with darkness for as long as I can remember," she said. "I cannot erase that history. I cannot undo the pain that was caused. But I can spend the rest of my life building something different, something that heals instead of harms." She announced the creation of a foundation dedicated to helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. Education programs, job training, mental health support, safe housing. Everything that had been taken from them would be restored, one person at a time. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Not everyone believed her. Not everyone trusted her. But Jae-yeon did not need their trust. She only needed the chance to prove herself, and she would spend years doing exactly that. Detective Kwon was promoted to lead a special task force dedicated to combating human trafficking across Asia. For years, he had been ignored, sidelined, told that his investigations were too dangerous, too politically sensitive. Now he had the resources and the authority to finish what he had started. Keanu met with him one final time before leaving Seoul. "You could have taken the easy path," Kwon said, shaking his hand. "Most people do." Keanu smiled faintly. "I tried the easy path once. It led nowhere good." Kwon nodded slowly. "Where will you go now?" Keanu looked out the window at the city that had changed his life. "I do not know yet, but for the first time in a long time, I am not running away. I am walking towards something." Sandra's reporting was nominated for every major journalism award that year. She won most of them. But the recognition she valued most came not from committees or organizations, but from the people whose lives she had helped save. Letters arrived from around the world. Emails filled her inbox. Survivors reached out to thank her, to tell her that her story had given them hope, had made them feel seen for the first time in their lives. One afternoon, Sandra visited a shelter in Seoul where rescued trafficking victims were recovering. She walked through the halls quietly, speaking with counselors and volunteers, listening to stories that broke her heart and mended it at the same time. Near the end of her visit, a young woman approached her. Her name was Mai. She was 22 years old. She had been trafficked from Vietnam 3 years earlier and had only recently been rescued. "They told me no one was coming," Mai said softly. "They told me no one cared about people like me. But you came." Sandra felt tears gather in her eyes. She took Mai's hand and held it gently. "You survived," she said. "That is the bravest thing anyone can do. And now you are not alone. You will never be alone again." Mai smiled for the first time in years. 6 months passed. The world moved on as it always does. New headlines replaced old ones. New scandals captured public attention. But some changes are deeper than headlines. Some changes happen in the quiet spaces between moments, in the hearts of people who have chosen to live differently. Keanu and Sandra found a small house on Jeju Island, far from the noise of the city. It was modest, just a few rooms surrounded by trees and silence. Keanu opened a motorcycle repair shop, smaller than the one he had left behind in Seoul. Sandra continued writing, but her pace was slower now, more intentional. She wrote not for deadlines, but for truth. Their life together was not perfect. They argued sometimes. They struggled with the scars they carried. Keanu still woke up some nights with Marcus's face in his mind. Sandra still flinched at unexpected sounds, a remnant of the danger she had faced. But they faced these struggles together. They learned that love is not the absence of pain. It is the willingness to hold each other through the pain and keep walking forward. One evening, they sat on their porch watching the sun sink into the ocean. The sky was painted in shades of gold and amber, and the air smelled of salt and wildflowers. "Do you ever regret it?" Sandra asked. "Walking away from his offer, you could have had everything." Keanu was quiet for a moment, then he reached over and took her hand. "I do have everything," he said. "I have peace. I have purpose. I have you. What more could anyone need?" Sandra leaned her head against his shoulder. "I spent so many years angry at you. I thought I would never forgive you for leaving. And now I understand. You were lost. And sometimes people have to lose themselves completely before they can find their way home." Keanu kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for giving me another chance." "You did not need my permission to change," she said softly. "You just needed to believe you were worth changing for." 1 year after the raid, a small ceremony was held in a garden outside Seoul. It was not a wedding. It was something more important, a memorial, a gathering of all the people whose lives had been touched by the events of that year. Jae-yeon was there, standing tall and composed. Detective Kwon stood beside her, along with members of his task force. Park Min-soo, the whistleblower, had come out of hiding to attend. And dozens of survivors filled the garden, their faces reflecting a mixture of grief and gratitude. Keanu was asked to speak. He stood before the crowd, his voice steady but soft. We are taught that power means strength, he said. We are told that winning means taking everything we can. But I have learned something different. True power is not about what you take. It is about what you give. It is about the choices you make when no one is watching. It is about standing up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. He paused, looking out at the faces before him. I was offered everything once. Wealth, control, legacy. I chose something else. I chose her. He looked at Sandra, who was wiping tears from her eyes. Not because she is perfect, not because love is easy, but because she makes me want to be better, and that is worth more than any empire. That is worth more than all the money in the world. Sandra stepped forward and read from her notebook. We are not defined by the darkness we have walked through, she said. We are defined by the light we choose to carry out of it, and we are never carrying it alone. Lanterns were released into the night sky. Each one represented a life saved, a choice made for good, a moment of kindness in an unkind world. They floated upward, glowing softly until they became indistinguishable from the stars. This story is more than entertainment. It is a reminder of truths we often forget in the chaos of daily life. The first lesson is that redemption is always possible. No matter how far you have fallen, no matter how many mistakes you have made, you can choose differently. Chairman Baek spent decades building an empire of darkness, but in his final days, he chose light. Keanu spent 15 years running from his guilt, but when the moment came, he turned and faced it. It is never too late to become the person you were meant to be. The second lesson is that kindness is strength. The world often tells us that compassion is weakness, that nice people finish last, but the opposite is true. It takes far more courage to be kind than to be cruel. It takes more strength to forgive than to hold a grudge. The people who change the world are not the ones who take the most. They are the ones who give the most. The third lesson is that love requires presence. Keanu left Sandra because he thought he was protecting her, but love does not work that way. Love means showing up even when it is hard. It means being honest even when the truth is painful. It means choosing someone every single day, not just once. The fourth lesson is that healing happens through helping others. Sandra found peace not by avoiding her pain, but by using it to fuel her purpose. Jae-yeon transformed her grief into a foundation that saves lives. When we reach out to help someone else, we often discover that we are healing ourselves at the same time. The fifth and final lesson is that your choices define you, not your circumstances, not your past, not what others expect of you. Every day you have the power to choose kindness over cruelty, love over fear, courage over comfort. Those choices may seem small in the moment, but they add up. They become your legacy. They become who you are. Keanu Reeves, the real one, once said something that has stayed with me. He said that grief changes shape, but it never ends. He carries his losses with him every day, but he does not let them make him bitter. He lets them make him better. That is the message of this story. You will face darkness in your life. You will be offered shortcuts that compromise your values. You will be tempted to give up, to run away, to choose the easy path. But you do not have to. You can choose differently. You can choose love. You can choose kindness. You can choose to be the person who makes the world a little bit brighter. And that choice, no matter how small it seems, matters more than you will ever know. The final image is this. Keanu and Sandra on a beach at sunrise, his arm around her, both looking toward the horizon. The past is behind them, the future is uncertain, but they are together, and that is enough. That is more than enough.